Once again, look who shows up.
I was going to say, look who's here.
Look who's here. You guys?
I had no idea you were even coming over, man.
Is that them? Is that the mixtapes?
No, it couldn't be. They wouldn't be hanging out around here.
Here in this kind of... Well, you're wrong. You're dead wrong, because this is the finest podcast recording studio in downtown Wentzville.
Well, it's at the very least the finest one in my backyard.
Well, okay. All right. Well, we'll play it safe there. It's Race and it's Reid. And we are the Of Apes collectively to make up Mixtapes. You're about to listen to our show.
I'm sorry. This is You Should Know This Song.
I'm glad you're here. You should know this song.
No,
everybody.
You should know this song.
No, don't. There you go. We're outside. The sun is shining. There's a breeze blowing. The cicadas are loud as crap again. People are mowing their lawns. It's like Saturday in the park.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not like Saturday in the park. It's like Saturday in a neighborhood.
There you go.
We are at Race's Oasis recording our podcast extravaganza.
Home of the world famous Mixtapes.
Most carefully curated.
That's world, WHIRLED.
Yes.
Because we're spinning around like crazy.
World shameless. What we're doing today, folks, glad you asked, by the way. What we're doing today is not much of the challenges and games thing.
No. Actually, none of the challenges, really.
I was trying to keep a few of them hanging in there just to see what
you
happens.
mean I just sent them all away is what you're saying?
It's a challenge, and you could argue it's a game to just persevere with us through what we're doing. We've got some things to talk about that we just can't really fit into other episodes, haven't been able to. And they've kind of piled up, and so we're just going to talk about them. A little bit of pseudo uncontrolled substance, I guess, but just an open format. This is You Should Know This Song, our rock music lyrics challenge commentary. That will be most heavily applied in this episode, sharing our opinions, which we do not either of us mistake for being factual or worth a shit.
However, my opinion is much more important than yours.
Well, I don't think anyone would argue that. I mean, anyone inside your head.
And there's a bunch of folks in there right now, and they're arguing about other shit.
So, getting on with it, and, trying not to drag it out too much. We got plenty of that coming up. We have a few minor-ish topics to touch on before we get into what we think is our sort of main subject here. And one of those minor topics...
well, I don't know how minor it is, but Aerosmith has announced that they are retiring from touring and, I believe, from recording. Essentially, they are closing the doors as a band.
That is freaky stuff to hear, especially in light of the Stones carrying on and other. They are a comparably storied.
Okay. Yeah. It's not far off.
They don't have quite the longevity, quite the time under their belts. But yeah, I'm just a little. I don't know. I was thrown off by it because I figured they would be one of the bands who
just kept going until nobody was left.
They've continued to tour even in the past couple of years, and I mean they're still perform great and whatever. So
and Tyler's had a couple of health issues where he's had to stop for a bit, and
and he's a takes care of himself kind of guy these days. So
I think you kind of have to be at that age.
I don't know.
With that schedule, you know what I mean? I
don't know. I guess I'm just feeling like it's just surprising. It's just really surprising.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was your youth, right? I mean,
they were a huge part of my musical
experience growing up.
Enjoyment and experience from the very early 70s, at least until through the 90s.
Yeah. You
know what I mean? And I still enjoyed a lot of the new music that they produced that came out on the radio, even through the 2000s. Anyway, surprising.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I mean,
right.
We talk about music, and they
are definitely a part of music.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially the part we talk about.
They had 15 studio albums and 9 live albums. And the 9 live albums thing in proportion, that's to me that pretty standout, but it speaks to the fact that they were known for their concerts.
Well, and for the popularity of them.
Right.
Absolutely.
They were really well known for their concerts. So.
Yeah, so
there's that.
Raise a glass.
Raise a glass to the Aerosmith guys. Hip, hip.
Thank you to the boys, the Aerosmith boys, for what they provided for us.
And if it's false retirement, if it turns out in 3 years they're all coming out of their skins and they decide that we got to give it one more shot, I'm okay with that. I hate that kind of thing, but
I mean,
okay.
The Eagles have done it how many times?
Exactly.
The Doobie Brothers have done it how many times?
Right. Exactly.
The Beach Boys have done it how many times?
bands have officially again announced their retirement?
This is our third retirement tour. Yes. Okay, so that's enough of that one.
That's Aerosmith. Hey, did anybody know, I just found this out the other day by pure happenstance, that Flock of Seagulls has new music out after I don't know how many years. A new song named Some Dreams. I listened to some of it. I didn't have time to listen to all of it. It sounds pretty cool. And they're supposed to have a new album out in 2025. Wow.
I just want to know, will they have new hair?
The images related, the band images related to the single, the YouTube video thumbnail, if you will, on the single is a face of a young guy with some pretty wild Flock of Seagulls-y hair. But
so
the band members...
Somebody's grandson.
Exactly. The front man, at least, and I think another one of the band members shown in the actual image of them playing
have
live
no hair.
Are bald. So, they got some leather jackets going, though.
Oh,
so,
there you go. There you go.
They don't look like they let their grown out bald happen. They shaved.
Yes, and again, with a face for radio, as I have.
Yes.
I'm making fun of something. I don't have a problem with baldness. It's never been an issue for me. But, you get old, that happens, right?
Yeah.
So, fuck me. I'm just being a jerk.
It happens. Okay, there's two more things for Reid, and then Race is going to take it. So I might as well just get these out of the way. On the way here, kind of a humorous side note, I was listening to 89.1 The Wood, KCLC, college radio station here in town for Lindenwood University. You can stream them online, whatever. And the morning's program, one of the morning's programs, the DJ was doing a formatted piece that I didn't catch the full name of, but it seemed to be picking a decade and playing some music from a decade. When I only had the chance on the way out here to hear two of the songs, and I know there were many more, he talked a little bit about some of the songs before playing them. I think he was given some background. The song that caught my attention was he played the recent Eddie Vedder cover of the English Beats, Sooner or Later,
which we covered on a previous episode.
And you and I talked about that recently, and I was waiting for him as he was loading up, the announcement of the track. This is the English Beat, cover Eddie Vedder has done recently, and so on and so forth, and it's on the soundtrack for the show The Bear and whatnot. And I was waiting for him to mention what you pointed out to me, and that is largely modeled on Pete Townshend's cover
Eddie
of the
Vedder's
song.
version, yes.
Eddie Vedder's version is largely modeled on Pete Townshend's cover of the song, but he didn't. He just started playing it as in, this is Eddie Vedder's cover of the song. And I was like, hey, man, I need to call that guy and tell him to tune into our show.
Well, and the thing is, it's a college radio station.
Right.
So you could probably actually do that.
I may be able to, yeah.
Not to tell him to listen to our show, but to point out that...
just to point out the,
hey, I'm loving your show, but...
Here's a little
that you may want to share,
track or whatever.
And if you need more information like that, you can always come over to
right.
To
let us really get you off track.
to listen to You Should Know This Song.
So that was kind of fun. I just thought that would be fun to point out. And here goes a unabashed self-indulgence. I started on this only in the last couple days. The thought popped into my head, and I just want to see if you can recognize, and if the listeners out there can recognize what it is that I have done here. And I'm about actually probably a third of the way, considering the available content, a third of the way through if I continue the effort. And I invite anybody to contribute to help me continue the effort. Send your letters, send your postcards, the whole thing. So I'm just going to start reading this story and see if you can figure out what's going on. Wait, slow down. I'm so tired. I've got a feeling this one's going to give it away. Dear Prudence, I don't want to spoil the party. Crying, waiting, hoping for no one. I'm a loser. I'm down. I'll cry instead. Lend me your comb, little child. I'll be on my way. All I've got to do when I get home, getting better, while my guitar gently weeps, have a banana, drive my car, helter-skelter, here, there, everywhere, free as a bird across the universe, back in the USSR. Because altogether now, with a little help from my friends, all things must pass. I feel fine. Getting better. Glad all over.
So
I'll be back. I'll follow the sun.
Are you trying to get every single song name in there?
Not every one, not every Beatles song name, but trying to put together something that's literally readable.
That's
and
readable.
Sort of makes sense.
Sure.
Out of the zillion Beatles songs titles, and the real ones, not cover songs, real legitimate Beatles songs titles.
Yeah.
I started looking through the list and I was like, you could totally write like a 2-page story out of this. Like you could fit them all together. It'd be ridiculous. But
I have a challenge for you on this line. Go ahead and finish your project, and then ask AI to do the same thing.
Oh, good thought.
And see who's
that's a good
who's
idea.
more readable.
That is a good idea.
That's a cool little idea.
if anybody else wants to pick up on that, or for that matter, I mean, they're not the only band that has a zillion songs. Look at the Rolling Stones song list. Look at any long-lived band.
Aerosmith, as we spoke a few minutes ago.
Right, Aerosmith. And think about how you could make a story out of just the names of their songs.
Just the titles. No
and I didn't put
songs.
any ands or ifs or add any, connectors, whatever. I can't think of the damn term for the function of the grammatical term for the word and, if, but. Conjunction. Good Lord.
I'm just watching his face turn purple. It's a blast.
I didn't add anything. Those are just the titles. Straight out. So there you go. That's all I'll interrupt with for the moment. I'll let us get on with what we're supposed to be getting on with.
Yeah, the remainder of the episode we want to kind of devote to a really largely unsung hero in rock and roll that's passed recently. And certainly anybody in the industry knows who he is. And there's a lot of fans out here, but John Mayall passed in the past month. And his fingerprints are all over rock and roll and blues and jazz. And there are literally dozens and dozens of top name acts, top name musicians,
performers, right, artists
that came through his band, in some cases because he brought them up, in some cases because they came and sat with him. I didn't think we could let it pass without spending some substantial time on John Mayall.
Right.
And his primary band for the majority of his life, the Blues Breakers.
The Blues Breakers, yes. Through which so many artists funneled. I mean, so many, and got launched. I mean, he's like the SNL of rock and roll artists.
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way to do this for me personally was to bring up a couple of Wikipedia pages.
Yeah. Something
about, one specifically for his life and contribution, then one for the members of the band.
Right.
There are other resources, but we're always touting Wikipedia, and I'm pretty much, in my case at least, going to be quoting directly.
Yes, so donate to Wikipedia, donate to Wikipedia, donate to Wikipedia.
He gets 3 of those per episode.
I have to apologize because it ain't going to stop. Look at what we're doing here.
So, John Mayall, born 29th November 1933, passed 22 July 2024. Blues and rock, songwriter, producer, father to the world kind of a thing.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I'm going to pull one out of my ear, the Clapton story, where Clapton literally came and stayed at his house and slept on the floor while he was there getting situated. Now, this is post leaving the Yardbirds, obviously.
Right.
But I mean, that kind of thing. And there are any number of artists who, not only did he welcome into the band and
mentor,
but
take under his wing,
gave them a place to stay.
Right.
Introduce them to their future wives, all over the place. I mean, this guy...
Their producers, their future bandmates, all sorts of things.
all of that.
Yeah.
He grew up in Cheshire, England, started out as a musician, went to Korea as part of national service when he was in the UK, and on leave bought his first electric guitar while he was in Japan. Came back, enrolled in the Manchester College of Art, started playing in a semi-pro band called the Powerhouse 4. After graduation, he got a job as a art designer, following his degree, but he just continued playing with local musicians. Eventually... kind of became the center of the band, and people came and went around him.
Yeah, he was the hub. Right, totally.
And this is just top of my head. This has nothing to do with what's on Wikipedia, okay? But, the 3 of the 4 core members of the original Fleetwood Mac were originally members of the Blues Breakers.
Right, went through the Blues Breakers.
Okay?
Right.
Obviously, Clapton, okay?
Right.
There are... We'll get to a list in a minute. But
I was going to start rolling off names from a list, and it's just... it's got to be its own part of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I can't find a way to adequately say, this is the grandpa of rock and roll, man.
Right.
He did not start it. He did not. Maybe he's the great uncle of rock and roll. Okay.
Right.
He didn't start it. He didn't. He wasn't influential in getting it going. But he was predominantly a blues and jazz guy. That's what he did. There are literally dozens, if not hundreds, of professional musicians that he helped along the path to doing the stuff that we listen to and the stuff that Reid and I specifically talk about on this podcast. I would suggest to all of you, if you have any interest in the history of the kind of music that we're talking about, go and look this guy up, because I'm not going to do justice, and I'm certainly not going to read it verbatim.
Yeah, we would be talking for literally
hours.
Yeah.
But we just wanted to spend a half an hour or so, giving the guy his props, man. And he's an OBE. It's a knight.
Yeah.
That's the equivalent of a knight these days in Britain. It's the Order of the British Empire, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes. And the thing on, the number of artists who have passed through, and one of the things it's a little bit of a jump ahead of what you're talking about, but I don't want to lose track of the thought, is, if nothing else, the exercise to go look at his look at the John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, and whatever iteration, and look at the song lists, the recording lists, and then look at the artists involved in those recordings, and you will be freaked out to hear playing in that recorded and produced song that maybe you've heard on the radio, maybe you listened to on an album, whatever,
right,
that it was played by this person who you recognize from completely otherwise.
Right.
Like you said,
Ainsley Dunbar is one, okay,
Yeah.
that came through, kind of a thing.
Right.
3 different bands that he was in that you know songs from.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, Jack Bruce.
Yes.
That kind of thing. You know, you would just be completely freaked out to know, oh, these people were playing that song with him, you know. So cool, and so much of it.
In the early 60s, his band was called the Blues Breakers. I mean, they had a lineup that included John McVie and Cyril Davies and Martin Hart, and they actually were the backing band or the lineup band behind John Lee Hooker for a while. And that's not the only one of those that they did, right? I mean,
right.
It's just nuts. It's just nuts. Peter Green, and I'm going to let you kind of run through the artists here for a minute because I'm kind of overwhelmed with it, to be all honest.
Well, for instance, and I know you've got some else to chip in here, but as we mentioned, I'm gonna pop off some names. We've already mentioned some of the bands that these people have ended up in. But John McVie, if you know much at all about music, you know him from...
he's the Mac in Fleetwood Mac.
Right, Fleetwood Mac for sure. And formerly, you know, in other bands, but even on his wiki page, one of the first things that popped up is that he participated in John Mayall and the Blues Breakers.
Right,
you know what I mean? Mick Taylor, right? I mean, come on. Just unbelievable. And one of the first things on his wiki page is that he was with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. Peter Green, Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce.
Ainsley Dunbar,
Mick Fleetwood.
Yes, the other half of Fleetwood Mac.
Keith Hartley, Buddy Whittington, Coco Montoya, Larry Taylor, Harvey Mandel, Andy Fraser, right. If you aren't familiar with, like, we can't possibly...
Andy Fraser was the bass player for free.
For free.
Yeah.
We can't possibly go into each of these people. So it's definitely a recommended exercise and I think it's kind of important to get an idea of the scope, you know, how much he influenced, how many people he influenced, because many of these people, you can look at the big names, but as always happens with music and with this kind of sort of thread, these people, even the lesser known ones, a bassist you'll see on the list or a drummer,
well, here's one.
They had a lot to do in the background.
Larry Taylor was a bass player, okay?
Right.
He was the bass player for Canned Heat.
Yeah.
But he also was a session player for the Monkees and Jerry Lee Lewis. Harvey Mandel, a lead guitar, was the guitarist for Canned Heat, rather. I'm sorry. Blue Mitchell, trumpeter, worked any number of artists as a composer and a session musician. And I'm just picking names at random.
Yeah,
here, okay?
here's Henry Lowther, an English jazz trumpeter who was in the Blues Breakers. He made his way through the Blues Breakers, also with Manfred Mann, with John Warren, with Bob Downs, the Keith Hartley band. Keith Hartley is another person listed in the Blues Breakers. What do you call that family? Let's just say it's a family.
I think that's a good one.
Played at Woodstock. So
Ernie Watts
these people
is
have been all over the place.
American jazz and rock saxophone player. Toured with the Stones, Charlie Hayden's Quartets, and played with Frank Zappa. I mean, and again, these are just some of the folks here,
right?
You know?
And I will fully admit that I am not familiar with Henry Lowther, but again, to kind of put the meat on the bones of how impressive John Mayall's contribution through these people is, Henry Lowther also worked with the Buzzcocks and Talk Talk and Charlie Watts. I mean, just his, history is full in and of itself. And part of it is because he passed through, the Blues Breakers and the connections that were made there and what that enormous hub of music was. Anyway.
Jesse Ed Davis, guitarist, played with Taj Mahal, Clapton, Lennon, Harrison, one of the many guitarists that played with Blues Breakers.
Right.
Randy Resnick, John Lee Hooker, played with John Lee Hooker, John Mayall, Canned Heat, Freddie King. You see what I'm saying here? Every single one of these guys went on to be in 16 other bands. Richard Francis Vito, or Rick Vito, played with Fleetwood Mac, was the lead guitarist there after Lindsey Buckingham left the group. We got Ann Patterson, who played saxophone. Her own band, Maiden Voyage, and she, again, 30, 40 years in the industry, right? It's just crazy to me the impact these people have, and we're only reading the ones that seem to have something that goes somebody you might know.
Right.
Chris Mostert played soprano sax and tenor sax. Played with the Eagles. Played with Don Henley. Part of the Mighty Horns. Joe Walsh.
Crazy. Just
Isn't it
crazy
nuts?
how many people. I wanted to look at Keith Hartley because he had his own band, English drummer, best known in England. Played at Woodstock, worked with Rory Storm, the Artwoods, John Mayall, but also replacement for Ringo Starr as a drummer for Rory Storm and the Hurricane, Liverpool-based band after Ringo joined the Beatles. I mean, that kind of connection is
nuts,
undeniable.
Man.
It speaks for itself.
Coco Montoya is a well-known American blues guitarist, right?
Yeah.
Was on 6 or 7 albums with him. He's on any number of albums as Coco Montoya. He's got his own stuff that he does. Walter Trout, a great blues guitarist.
Yeah, Walter Trout.
Was with them for a few years. Freebo Friedberg, his name was Dan Friedberg, but he went by Freebo, was pretty much what he called himself. Worked with another bass player, worked with Bonnie Raitt and Ringo Starr and John Mayall, of course, John Hall, Aaron Neville, and all of these guys that do this, that we're talking about, they're all over the place. It's amazing the impact they have. There's kind of this weird timeline thing on the Wikipedia page. And the number of lines that cross and intersect and how long they were there, it's mind-boggling to even look at, frankly.
Yeah, this would be a fun thing to do, to do a big thread on for sure. And we're sort of skirting the obvious here. If you go and look at where somebody like Jack Bruce, somebody more notable like Jack Bruce has been.
Right.
Through Cream, through BLT.
Yes.
Through, and arguably hanging around some familiar people, when you look at his Wikipedia page and his history and his context, it all speaks to the same thing. These people made their way through the Blues Breakers and then out into the world. In many instances, most early on through the Blues Breakers and out in the world. Some of them had plenty of notoriety prior to and joined the Blues Breakers because of their notoriety.
Because you got to play with John Mayall.
You got the chance,
yeah,
right.
Exactly. I mean, that's kind of the deal,
The Jack Bruce credits also include Grand Bond Organization. He got together with Leslie West and Corky Lang from Mountain and formed West Bruce and Lang, a band in 1972. Played with several bands as a touring member between then and got back together with Cream. I mean, those contacts in and of themselves, holy cow.
I'm looking at a discography here, okay? And the list is forever long, all right? First album, 1966. It's the one with Clapton, right?
Sure.
It's what's called the Beano album because there's Clapton's reading a Beano comic on the cover.
Right.
Chart placement, and I'm just going to go over the UK's chart placement because there's all the countries are represented here, right? Number 6, the second album, A Hard Road, number 10. Crusade, number 8. The Blues Alone, number 24. Bare Wires, number 3. Blues from Laurel Canyon, which is another album that everybody should be familiar with, number 33. Empty Rooms, number 9. So in those first 6 or 7 albums, there are half a dozen that are in the top 10 as an album, not as a song, as an album.
As an album.
Right, okay? USA Union, number 50, Back to the Roots, 31. And after that, it drops off because we get into the 80s when blues wasn't such a big deal anymore. But it's just amazing the amount of music and the number of musicians and the number of people that were touched directly by John Mayall within being in the band. And as you said, Clapton and Bruce and Ainsley Dunbar, okay, they were all of them in multiple bands, right? And had their own careers as frontmen.
Right.
But any one of these 70 or 80 people that were in his band all went on to be in 5 other bands.
Right.
And not all the bands included only the former members of the Blues Breakers. And there was a period when John Mayall wasn't the Blues Breakers, it was just the John Mayall band. And then they became the Blues Breakers again. And the live albums alone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 15. There's 40, maybe more here, okay? Live albums. 70th birthday concert with the Blues Breakers. It was in 2003.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Crazy.
saying? There are 40 live albums. Okay, this is not a guy that sat back and rested on his laurels.
40 live albums.
40 live albums.
That is crazy.
I believe there's actually more live albums than there are studio albums.
Right.
Okay, this is a guy that was out playing the blues every day, every night, forever. Hold on here. What do we got? 35 studio albums, 34 live albums, 24 compilation albums, 4 EPs, 44 singles, and 4 video albums. His 38th studio album was released in 2022. So, I'm not.
It's crazy. I'm a little distracted because I'm perusing through Mick Taylor's background.
Oh, yeah.
And holy cow, it's just unbelievable.
Name the big 4 bands that he was in.
Well, he was heavily involved with the Stones.
Right.
And the reason I'm pausing there for a minute is because after reading the details of sort of how he filled in on recordings and things, it reminds me of some of these artists we've talked about who are in groups who do the studio side of things to make the songs the songs you know. You know what I mean? There's a lot of references to things like that. He got together with Ken, I did not know this, got together with Ken Hensley of Uriah Heep and made a band called The Gods. And they had a brief stint open for Cream and what have you. Anyway, played around with Peter Green, was involved with Fleetwood Mac.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. I mean, all these...
I mean, Ainsley Dunbar was the drummer for a while, right? I mentioned him a couple of times.
Right.
Okay. Zappa, Beck, Journey, Starship, Nils Lofgren, Eric Burden, Ian Hunter, Lou Reed, David Bowie, Mick Ronson, Whitesnake, Pat Travers, Sammy Hagar, Michael Schenker, UFO, and on. And I'm not done.
Right.
Okay. That's one drummer, of which there were 12 with the band.
Yes.
And that's the number of bands that he touched.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's just, I cannot, I'm
It's
honestly at a loss for how to explain it.
It's so fascinating to really sit down for a minute and, just look at these guys and what was involved here. There is I believe I saw reference to a film coming out or a film done. Anyway, that would be, there's a documentary you can see on YouTube, John Mayall, Godfather of British Blues. That's an hour long, but there are a couple other things I see popped up, and that's, to me, that's really where the meat is going to be, is to go look at somebody who's, if there's a documentary or two out there, that's the story. They're
going to do a better job than we are.
Absolutely. That's where I'm going to go watch it to find out what I'm talking about and what it is that I sit here and say, with awe that I am in admiration of. But the more I look and the more I read about it, the less I know about the whole phenomenon. It's a phenomenon.
I mean, really and honestly, the answer is you got to go look at this stuff, kids. I mean, there's just, we can't possibly do it justice or give you any feel of the breadth and width and the absolute enormity of A, John Mayall's catalog, B, John Mayall's influence on other musicians, the influence of those musicians on other musicians. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's no way that we could actually cover it effectively. So between the available resources on the web, say Wikipedia, for example, the YouTube stuff, hell, you could just look at the number of people that did the pour out of feelings the day that he died, the tributes that came out. That, there were hundreds from people whose names you know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
It's just...
It's mind-boggling the amount of impact this one man had on rock and roll. I mean, yes, he was a huge figure in the blues. Yeah. Especially in what's called the white blues, okay? But so much of rock and roll is based in the blues. And that's where many, many, many musicians came from, if not physically, at least spiritually, from a blues connection of somehow.
Right.
Okay? And as you can see, I mean, and certainly many of the British Invasion bands, many of the very early rock and roll bands here in the States, they were all playing blues covers, right?
Yeah.
And these guys, and the guys that they touched, and the guys they touched, and they'll tell two friends, and so on bullshit, right? It's mind-boggling. We cannot possibly do it justice.
I just want to see it all laid out in like spreadsheet form or something. All these people, and then just some quick blurbs of all because there's so much. The more I look, there's so much crossover. The Mayall phenomenon was a hub, but also kind of a network. Like so many of these people, when you look at their stories, they played maybe together with a particular person in John Mayall's organization at whatever time.
Right.
Went on about their way, and then their paths crossed with two or three of those people that they played with again and again.
Like when you hover over a cell in a spreadsheet and it shows you all the references.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
So there's all this crisscrossing stuff that just turns into like a web of all these people and big name bands that they played with or filled in for, or, even for a short stint.
Right.
They did a tour with because somebody couldn't make it, or
Right.
On and on. And just the band names are unbelievable. The artists are all over your mind. They're just all over your mind.
Well, all over the music you listen to. I think that's
what I
the
mean.
thing that that I want to make clear is, this isn't just a collection of great musicians.
Right.
This is a large collection of great musicians that are in all of the music we're talking about all the time.
Right.
Okay? These guys were in Journey. These guys were in several different iterations of Clapton bands. These guys were in two of the guys that were here ended up playing with Bob Cray at some point.
Right.
You know what I mean? It crosses back and forth between blues and jazz and rock and roll. The artist, like you said, it's like a helix almost.
Right. Right.
It's crazy to look at. So in my very, very pathetic attempt to say, let's be aware of John Mayall, let's pay some homage.
Homage.
I'm doing a horrible job of it. I really, because I'm just overwhelmed. What I'm saying is,
and also it's hard. Like it's something for a documentary. Truly, like it's hard to, even if we were better prepared, sitting here reading off of a scripted thing.
It's a Ken Burns thing.
It's a Ken Burns thing. It's still hard to give it the emphasis that it deserves to have. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It is he was a phenomenon. However he anchored whatever that was.
Right.
It was a phenomenon.
It's just amazing. In all seriousness, shut down the podcast. Go to the web
and go.
And look at this stuff, kids.
Right.
I mean, it's fucking amazing. It really is.
And admittedly, a lot of it is, English, British blues influenced. But think about what you're saying there when you make that comment, or if you have that observation, as I did. I mean, I was just looking at Resnick, the guitarist who played with blues greats, John Lee Hooker and stuff like that, prior to making his way through the Blues Breakers. So leading into the Blues Breakers and coming out of the Blues Breakers, so much intertwining of important musical stuff. Just really,
it really
impressive.
is a connections thing, like you talk about all the time.
Right.
We don't have and I'm not going to say we don't have the wherewithal, but we don't have the ability to just, it's so vast.
Yeah.
There's no effective way to talk it, is what I'm trying to say.
My gosh.
You have to look at this. You just have to look at this.
Go to the wiki page. What I was just talking about is in some form there. There's a timeline chart.
Yes.
That I didn't see prior to this. It's way down. I was looking at the members, the John Mayall members on the wiki page, and you scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll through these dozens and dozens of people. And then there's actually a spreadsheet chart down there that's a timeline with all of these names.
And that's what I said, how they all cross and
yeah, I didn't realize that's what you were referencing.
Yeah, it's just nuts, man. I mean, and this
is awesome.
This spreadsheet thing that he's talking about, this chart thing, it's 3
So
web pages deep. Okay,
so cool.
And it's not just the names, but it shows where they all cross over and references with the solo bands and the Blues Breakers, and man, it's cool shit.
It's a mind-boggling thing.
It is, and if you love rock and roll, you need to know who John Mayall is and what his impact was. You just do.
Yeah.
I can't say it any other way. So I'm actually going to do something that I almost never do and shut up.
Shut up and say thanks for tuning in.
And you go look. Go look.
Just go, not right now. I'm gonna look more and goof around some more, and I'm definitely gonna watch the documentary because I'm super interested.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with several of their songs from growing up.
Right.
But I never really did a deep dive. Every time I look at doing a deep dive, I can see that it's going to take some time to sit down and look through it. You know what I mean? But I'm super fascinated. I'm super motivated to do it.
So maybe since this is just talk and no challenges and no data for playlists, I think what I'm going to do for the playlist for this is go find a half a dozen Blues Breakers tunes.
Sure.
And then go find another half a dozen songs that come from the people that come from the people.
Yeah.
And then go one layer deeper.
Just put a little bit of it out there, a little peppering out there.
Yeah, all of this is stuff that's possible, that's out there because at some point John Mayall touched somebody's life.
Right.
Musically
six
or otherwise.
degrees of separation. Only in this instance, it looks like maybe 3 degrees of separation. Yeah, awesome. Very awesome.
Cool.
Okay, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. This has been You Should Know This Song.
We are Mixed Apes.
And we are going to cut it off here and say, go have a great day and enjoy checking out the John Mayall story.
Take care.
Peace.